Hello everyone and welcome back. We're continuing with our high poly here. I'm really happy with how this frame is looking. Everything's going really smoothly. Things are going to be going a lot quicker now. We are getting stuff into ZBrush very quickly, just polishing it up. One thing I want to do moving forward is let's go ahead and make a new layer here, and we'll call this ZBrush. And the point of this is we can just sort of keep track what we've already put into ZBrush. So if I select this frame, we can add selected objects and we can just turn off the visibility, just so we quickly know like, hey, we've already put this in. We don't need to worry about it. And we can also take these bolts and add them there as well. So we can just continue going through and quickly getting everything through. I think the next thing that makes the most sense would probably be to get these feet in. With things like these, there's no point in keeping them separate. We're going to be treating them all the exact same. So I'm going to grab them all and just combine the meshes. We can isolate these guys. Very, very simple. What I want to do with this is let's open up our UV editor. And it's just on the other screen for now. What I do want to be checking essentially is the hard edges, which should be all pretty good. So we just have the hard edges on the top and the bottom, which is perfect. We can then just select these faces, hit our tool that breaks up our UV shells based on hard edges. Everything's split up as it should be. Perfect. Put this back off onto the other screen. And we can just essentially take these, hit the export button, go over to ZBrush, and get this guy in really quick. Just going to append a random shape. I always just go with the star and obj in. Oh, my bad. I forgot to actually select the star and hit obj in. I was replacing the screws instead. So now we got these guys. Very simple. If we shift F, we can auto apply our groups so they're all different poly groups. Let's go ahead and Dynamesh this guy. We can keep it consistent. I think everything we've Dynameshed so far was about 1,000. So if we Dynamesh this, it'll mean our poly count per like square centimeter will be on average the same as everything else. So we have that now. The poly count is higher. I might want to crank that up a little bit, but we'll just sort of go along with it for now. And if we need more, we'll add more. For this, just polish by features, crank that up. Just trying to round everything out like so. I feel like this one is, oh, it's just the perspective's a little funky. But yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I'm going for. And then we didn't get to do this last time, but we have our poly groups split up essentially for the top and the bottom. If I look at the bottom, it's a different poly group. We can use our masking to sort of specifically target these sharp edges that we put into place. We're going to do that by going to just having groups selected and masked by features. So it's masking by the groups, and our groups are separating along this edge here. That's what we set up in our UV editor. I explained more about this in the previous parts. So then we can just sort of, grow our mask, sharpen it a little bit to get it tighter, grow it again. And we have a nice mask around both sides. If we control click somewhere into the viewport, we can invert our mask, and from here, we can just hit it with a standard polish. And if I control, click and drag, I can get rid of our mask. And yeah, we just sort of softened out those feet there. Very simple. I might want to then just do a quick polish over the whole thing, like 25. Yeah, and that's that part done really quickly. We can go back to Maya. As you can see, we're going to essentially be repeating a lot of the same stuff. Very weird. That was acting strange. So yeah, I can now add this to the ZBrush layer, and we're just going to be sort of taking away at everything here. There's going to be a couple weird ones, a couple weird exceptions, where it's going to be a little bit more complex. For example, preserving these kind of shapes here. But we'll get to them when we get to them. But we can essentially get a lot done in a short amount of time doing it this way. We pretty much have our high poly like 80 5% of the way done by the time we finish our last chapter. So once again, I'm going to combine these guys. Let's isolate them. Let's check out how we set up our hard edges. Pretty much exactly as we want them to be. Perfect right there. Anytime there's a harsh transition. So we can go ahead, select those faces, break up our UV shells based on the hard edges. So perfect time for us to send this over to ZBrush. And then duplicate those guys, or you can append whatever you need to get an extra subtool in here. OBJ in on top of that. And now we have these bottom parts of the feet. We're going to be doing a very similar treatment on these guys where we just auto groups with UVs, Dynamesh, polish by features is going to be getting rid of those harsh chamfered edges. Smooths that part out, but it's keeping this sharp edge, which is nice. We can then target that edge specifically with a mask by features, grow the mask a little. Mostly worried about the bottom here, actually, this area. And we can just do a light polish. Sorry, we want to invert our mask first. Light polish. And of course, like I am looking at reference on the other screen, so it's very important to be trying to get a sense for how hard these areas are. It is a pretty soft, or a rather, sorry, not a very soft transition. It is still pretty harsh. Something along those lines, and then just a quick little polish all over. Maybe not even that much, maybe like 5. It's really easy to overdo it with this stuff. But you can see now what I was explaining before. By having this, and this be different parts, we get these nice like seams in the middle where these parts are beveling into themselves, and we get these nice lines or panel lines or however you want to describe them, even though in the actual low poly, we'll be keeping it all as one uniform mesh. It'll all be one piece. This is just a quick way to get those sort of distinct different parts to it, because they look like they're 3 different components. Very nice. We can go back here, add these to our ZBrush layer. Now we have these guys. So this part, honestly, is going to be a little bit tedious. But once we get everything into ZBrush, we can start adding custom damage. It'll be nice to see it all polished, and that'll get us our final high poly pretty quickly. I'm just combining these guys, and there's really no groups I need to separate with them, so I'm just going to send them straight off to ZBrush. I say that because there's no specific areas I'd want to target with these guys. If I import them, OBJ in, they're pretty much already doing their job pretty perfectly. I can still do an auto groups with UV, and what I am going to be doing is, I feel like Dynameshing is going to make them a little too soft, so I'm just going to straight up divide and smooth, and then delete the lower, and it's looking really soft. It's doing its job really good. Yeah, I will point out though that this looks a little polygonal. We'll be doing another pass later where we chip away some damage at it. I'll soften it out then, because it does look a little low poly for a high poly. Nope, let's get back to Maya. These guys we can add to ZBrush. And let's see here. I don't want to sort of bring all of these pieces into one ZBrush like viewport at the same time. It's going to be way too much for everything to process at once. So let's just get the things that are attached to the main body directly, and then we'll have, like, say, all the interior parts with the keys will be like a different scene, and then all the top pieces will be a different scene or something like that. Let's focus on this front plate. It's a pretty important piece. This one might be a little bit more complex to get set up properly, just because of the nature of the shape, and some of these thin areas might be a problem. Just because of, yeah, anytime you have a super thin edge like this when you're polishing, it'll get a bit tricky. It'll probably make more sense when we actually import it, and I can explain it that way. So let's just do our standard check here. Let's check out our hard edges. And I'm going to turn off this button here. just showing where our UV seams are, which is not very important right now because our UVs aren't set up properly anyways. Let's check our hard edges. We want these to be soft. Yeah, that's looking pretty much what we want anytime there's a 90-degree turn or anything like that. Cool. Let's go ahead and select all these faces. UV breakup by hard edge. We can send this guy off. Like I said, this one will probably be a little bit more complex, so we'll see how this goes. Duplicate and obj in. So let's start off by auto groups with UVs. And we're gonna have to dynamesh this. I'm gonna crank this up a little bit, probably closer to 2K. We're gonna need extra geo on this because there's a lot of thin parts. So it'll probably end up lagging everything for a second while it's processing. Like dynameshing can be a little bit expensive on your computer to process. So let's just have it figure this out. And we'll see, maybe it's just like an absurd amount of geometry and I added way too much. It's very likely. Another thing to mention, yeah, 4 million is a bit much. You can already see it's lagging everything. So let's go somewhere in the middle, maybe like 1400. But you'll notice with ZBrush, when you start to add too much geo or you over predict your dynameshes, you're going to be crashing quite a bit. So I'd recommend saving pretty often. Even this is starting to lag, so we're not going to have too many more things in this viewport specifically before we dive into a different one. And I'll explain what that means in a second when we get to it. So let's focus on just this piece and we can turn off the view for everything else. I do that just by shift clicking on the eyeball for the piece that we're currently selected on. And if we're hovering over something, even if there's no eyeballs, we'll still be looking at it. Conversely, I do believe there is a button here that isolates just the one that you're looking at, but I think it might be in the newer version of ZBrush. I could be wrong. But anyways, let's work on this piece. Let's start by doing a polish by features. And you can see it's giving us some wonky results here. Because ideally you should just be able to type in 100, and we'll call it a day. For the most part it's good. Down here there's some issues. So I'm going to mask out some areas like we did before in the last part. I'm going to mask out these screws. Just so we don't have to deal with them shrinking in size too much. This, of course, is just control clicking and drawing onto it. If any of this stuff is confusing, I did go over pretty much all of it in the last part, and I'll try to bring it up for the first few parts. But yeah, just control drawing with my left mouse button. I guess it goes through, but that's not the worst thing. These bottom parts I want to pretty much preserve completely, so I'm going to hold Control, click up here and go to this mask option and just select all of this stuff so I get the bolts and the rings and all that. And then hit Control and go back to Mask Pen and just draw out these areas as well. So this is how I've been doing it for now. I'm actually watching a new tutorial right now myself on making handguns inside of Maya and ZBrush, and they're showing a similar but different workflow where they utilize a tool called creasing. And I think I will probably be doing that workflow moving forward, because it seems to be a little bit faster than this and it's a lot more precise. This is relying on a lot of masking, a lot of going back and forth. So I'll experiment with both. This does get the job done though, so I'll be utilizing it for this tutorial. But anyways, with those masked out, we can go to our polish by features, crank that up to 100. Just keep cranking it. I want this to be smooth. Just want to make sure it's not really messing anything else up. This area is getting pinched a bit, but it will work itself out when we do our standard polish, which is nice. So I can invert our mask now and do a standard polish by features. I'm going to do it very lightly, because it's going to be pretty strong on this stuff. Maybe even like 2. And that seems to be working on everything. Let's once again invert our mask and go for a standard polish. Something of like 6% maybe. And it's making some areas look good and some areas not so much. Maybe we could do more. 25. I think we should get rid of the masks and just focus on a very light polish overall. Like a 5. Or we could try a different type if we do like a polish crisp edges. This version I think is a good one. Like a 2%. Yeah, this is looking a little bit more desirable. See what I'm talking about with this being super thin? This is passable because it's metal. I think it still gets the job done. This part not so much though, sadly. What I might even just want to do for this is divide it. We're going to get a lot more geo, but it's going to be able to withstand polishes a little bit better. Same with this ring too. But for now I'm just going to just mask this out completely, because we do have to put a screw in here, and like it's not a massive deal, but we just need to make sure that divot stays there. But yeah, polish crisp edges seems to be doing it pretty good. Got a nice smooth transition over all these pieces. These areas are looking pretty crisp. Very nice here. We're still getting that smooth transition, which is good. My only issue is it kind of looks like these are divoting in a little bit. I might try to use brush. So I'm pressing B to get my brushes to come up, and then pressing H for H polish. You could of course find it in here, or just hit H. And H polish typically just flattens everything out. It is pretty strong, so I'm going to turn the intensity down to something like 1 even. And I'm just sort of buffering out these areas and smoothing it out by holding Shift, just to flatten it. I might even want to try masking just this area. And doing like a polish by features to bring those hard edges back. Or maybe I should have just masked them from the very beginning. Let's bring this guy back to the start by dragging this back. So this is where it's dynameshed. And essentially I'm just going to mask out these guys. This is just returning back to when we masked everything out. Mask out this area as well. And then we'll do our polish by features to smooth everything out. And it is pinching these areas a little bit, but I think we should be able to fix that pretty easily with our polishes. I'm mostly just concerned about these areas here. So I'm just going to hit 100 a couple times. So everything else should be smooth, but it keeps these guys nice and sharp. Same with all these. Now we can go into these guys and give them a very subtle, like I believe we only did like 2 on these, just to sharpen it all up. We can go for our polish now over everything. Which once again was very, very light. But you can see it's giving us nicer results overall. These pinching areas though should probably be fixed up a little bit. I'm just using the smooth brush to get rid of them. And then the polish will take care of the rest. I just don't want to nick the edges really. But yeah, we can essentially divide this like we did before. Mask out these areas. I'm going to go back to the pen draw. And I suppose I could use symmetry for this, but at this point I think this is the last time I'd have to anyways, so. We got those 2 guys masked out. We can just do a very light polish over everything. Okay, that did very little. Let's try polish crisp edges. Yeah, that's definitely the better one for this example. Do it again. Just messing with the values. You never want to just dive into it too harshly off the bat. But yeah, this is exactly how I want it to be looking right now. Very, very smooth, solid looking. The only problem areas might be these guys, but we can invert the mask and do a very subtle polish, maybe even just like 1. And yeah, I still think that ring's thick enough. There's a little bit of a wobble there, but I don't think it's ever going to be noticeable. Especially if we shift click the eyeball and bring everything back. Yeah, you're not really noticing it, especially because this piece is blocking it off anyways. We do have to bring in the bolts for this guy, as well as the bolts for these guys. And yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's get rid of these hard edges, or the hard edge view. Add this to the ZBrush view. Maybe I'll bring it back for now just so I can easily find all these bolts. I think these guys don't have cutouts, if I'm not mistaken. There's 1, 2... Yep, that's something totally different. Okay. So there's all of these guys here. Combine them. I can just, like the rest of the bolts, just send them off. And I'll add those to the ZBrush layer. We'll duplicate this guy. OBJ in. Actually, it's just safer in general, and I think I'm going to do this moving forward, just appending a new piece and replacing that new appended piece with the object you're bringing in. It's just more consistent, and I say that because when you're replacing an existing piece with another model you're bringing in, it might still have the information of its like previous transitions and scaling and rotation and all that, and it'll pop it somewhere in the ZBrush scene where you can't even see, and it gets kind of funky. So this is just more of a guarantee that it's going to pop up in the right place. So let's just do our standard divide with smooth and delete the lower so it's very soft, and polish them up a little bit. Okay, that's good. That reminds me, we didn't polish the screws on the very bottom. So if you hold Alt and click on a object, it'll actually have that one selected, and we can just give this a very basic polish overall. Maybe I want to do a polish crisp edges. Yeah, that's giving us proper results. Okay. And yeah, when you're polishing, experiment with turning these on and off. They give different sort of styles of polish, and they're worth checking out for sure. Right, so I want to get these screws in now. These little dots. It's probably worth saving at this point because ZBrush just has a bad tendency of crashing a lot. So I'm just going to go and do File, Save As, Highpoly _01, and just make sure we have all of our progress. And yeah, we can dive right back into here. So we said we were going to grab these guys. So like I said before, there's no point keeping them separate. Like these are all the same piece, so I might as well combine them and bring them all in at once, because I'm going to be treating them all the exact same, the same polish, same damage pass. Yeah, it's all going to be the same. So with these guys, check the hard edges. Pretty much anywhere there's a 90-degree angle, which is perfect. We can split up our UV shells based on hard edges and spit these guys over into ZBrush. Let's just go in here and append a random shape. So we got those guys there. This is one of those tasks when we're just sort of getting everything in and polishing them, where you can just sort of shut your brain off a little bit and put on some good music. But essentially auto groups with UVs. Dynamesh this at like 1000. It's looks pretty low poly, to be honest. If I hit Shift F, yeah, it's looking a little low poly, so I might even just crank up the Dynamesh to 2000. And then from here we can just, yeah, polish crisp edges. Mask by features groups, so we can get all those hard edges selected very easily. Grow mask and even sharpen it. Invert that and just do a very subtle polish on everything. It's important, of course, to be looking at the reference for these guys. Where was the Pokeball style ones? These guys. So they are pretty hard in general. So I don't want them to be too soft. So maybe a very subtle polish like that. It's kind of giving us the look we're going for. And then we just got to get the inside pieces. So add that to the ZBrush layer. We have these inside pieces. We can just mesh combine them. I have a feeling that the hard edges will probably be set up properly already. Yep. Just anywhere there's a harsh transition where we want it to be polished. Let's go ahead and hit our hotkey to separate the UV shells. Send it off. And as I mentioned in the last part of this, as you can see, like most of these shapes are very, very, very quick. It's mostly just the shell that's going to take a long time. OBJ in to get these guys in. Like the rest of these parts are just going to be like boom, 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 boom. Very quick to get inside of here. Auto groups with UVs. Dynamesh is probably going to need to be cranked up pretty high. And then just a standard H polish. Mask by features. Grow. Invert. Very subtle standard polish. I kind of want to keep those edges there, so I'm trying to find a different polish that does that. Polish crisp edges is definitely not it. This one's still giving it, but it's softening it out a little bit, which I kind of like. Polish at 1 softens it out too much. I guess I could divide it to give it more geo. And the polish would be lighter. Yeah, something like that. It's pretty spot on to the reference that I'm seeing at least. So that's that. I would probably consider this all to be like one solid piece where all these things are working together pretty well. And the beauty of this workflow is, say I messed something up in one area, I can just import one of these pieces. Like, it's not like I'm affecting everything at once. The more separated things are, the easier it is to sort of quarantine a bad mesh or an area that's, you know, in need of fixing. So yeah, that's the main part. I might actually include these two pieces because they're technically attached to the frame. And then that'll probably do it for those. Then we'll have to dive into like a separate mini scene within ZBrush. And we'll probably do like the back or something. So yeah, let's grab these guys. This one should be pretty standard. If we look at our hard edges, it'll probably, yeah, just the stuff which we'd want to polish. I'm wondering if this is round enough, but it should be. Just in case, I can grab all these edges and even like all these ones and just bevel them. Do something like that. Merge the verts. And I just want to make sure that these, yeah, they're their own thing. Just so it's all softer around the edges, so it's easier to kind of get that smooth look from the inside especially. So if we check our hard edges now, we don't want this to be hard. We can probably just do an auto smooth and it'll figure it out. Yep, hard. I believe we wanted this face to be hard as well. So we'll harden that. But other than that, we want these guys to be soft. Cool. Let's go ahead and run our script. Breaks up the shells. We can spit this guy out over to ZBrush. Bring in a mesh to append and replace with our new one. So auto groups and just get some crazy amount of geo on this guy. Dynamesh him at like 1500. 100,000 polys is pretty small for ZBrush, to be honest. So I'm going to divide him and delete the lower. That's an appropriate amount of geo for something so round. And then we can just polish by features. And I'm going to have to do this quite a few times. I'm just going to keep typing in 100. And I'm just going to isolate it. Yeah, that's pretty much the exact shape I'm going for. Let's go ahead and mask by features on these groups. Grow, sharpen, grow, grow. Get a pretty solid selection there. We can invert the mask and we can start polishing it up. Keeping an eye on the reference, of course. We don't really have a good image of the inside of this thing. There might be just a couple shots from the back that show it off. Could have sworn we had some, some shots looking through the back. Yeah, it's looking pretty, like it's not like sharp to the touch. It's somewhat softened like this. I'm just going to polish it without any masks on to even everything out. And I think that'll probably do it for this piece. Can bring everything back into view. Yeah, it's not looking like you're gonna cut your finger running it along it or anything like that. Okay, and then we did have a little peg going through it. These guys. I'm surprised I made these two different meshes. I'm actually just going to combine them here. Mesh combined. I kind of feel like they should have been anyway, so I'm just going to snap this up here. Delete the inside face. Delete this inside face. And then just bridge it all across. Of course it's going to do the twist. Once again, to fix that, you just bridge one edge. And then when you bridge everything else, it'll have more confidence in how it's bridging. Yeah, I believe with a piece like this, we're going to bake down the entire thing. So I don't really care about the geo all that much. Actually, no, if we were to bake it, we'd want to bake them in separate pieces. So I see why I set it up this way now. So let me separate this and then I'll explain it. So the reason we'd want to bake this in separate pieces is because we would want to bake this guy with this mesh all in one, because this is only visible from this sort of view, so it would be baked onto this guy, and we'd want these to be in their own groups. And then we'd also want this to be baked only onto this guy and have them in their own groups. And then we'd want to keep these guys separate so we don't have any weird artifacting in between. So that makes sense why they're separated into their own groups. It is a little silly sort of bringing these guys in separately though, so I'm still going to combine them because I'm going to keep them together and treat them the exact same. But when we're actually done with them, I'm going to be separating them into different meshes. So let's go ahead and check our hard edges. Set up very good. We can split them up. Send this over to ZBrush. All right, we'll bring in a shape. And there we go. We have a nice plug for that sort of bell shape. We probably don't have to do really anything to it. I'm still going to be dynameshing it, pretty much maxing that out, softening the edges a little bit, and then just a very, very light polish to just give it that high poly look. Yep. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So we can add that to the group. I suppose all of these pieces are technically part of the frame as well, since they're directly attached, very similar to how that bell was. So I think these will be the last pieces I will attach to the frame. There's obviously a strong argument that everything is attached to the frame, and an even stronger argument for pieces like this in the back. But I think these sort of ruler pieces in the top will all get their own, and then these interior guts will get a separate sort of spot in ZBrush. I don't know if I'll get to that in this part specifically. Maybe I'll just do each thing will get its own video. Who knows? I might even attach this to the front. Yeah, I think we could probably attach all these guys in, and that'll probably be a good place to end for this specific video. We can attach these 3 bolts because they're all doing the same thing. They're all attached to the same piece. They're all going into this guy. So we can export them. We can go into ZBrush. And get our camera in there. Let's append a random shape, and of course replace it with those screws. Can auto group some just for fun. It's just a habit at this point, honestly, and then just crank the Dynamesh on them. And then let's go ahead and give them all a polish. We might have to divide it a little bit to give it more geo. I'm noticing that this guy is a little bit sensitive to everything, and I want to polish by features because this guy doesn't seem fully round. One solution to that, of course, is just masking. So I could just mask out this guy and have him be the only selection, and then just polish by features. Damn, I guess we really do need more geo on these guys. That should definitely be more than enough. Yeah, crank up the polish by features. And then with these guys, what are we gonna do about this guy? I suppose he's fine on his own. I just don't like that bumpy sort of cut in the middle of him, so I kind of even want to just go into brushes and do DS for damn standard. And just sort of draw into it. Which isn't obviously the most ideal solution, but like from that far away, that's a screw, and you're never going to get any closer than that. This one's fine the way it is. We'll chip some damage into it later. And then this guy is there's some stuff going on with him. Polish by features, and then probably a standard polish. Polish crisp edges maybe. Trying to figure out why these edges are so bumpy. Polish crisp edges is kind of doing it. I'm just sort of experimenting with the polishes. So polished crisp edges seems to be the winner. It is leaving these little holes in the mesh though. Let me just zoom out. I feel like when we bake it down, it'll be just fine. We're not going to see it any closer than that, and then the texture will be doing all the work at that point, so we're good in that department. Go ahead and add that there. This guy will be a little bit tricky. These right here will get a special treatment, but let's bring this guy in first. What might be easiest with this is to actually have a cylinder coming through it. What I mean by that is we actually have a cylinder inside of this sort of spiked pattern. The way I'm going to do that is just extrude, pull this in, and then extrude this up, and then essentially snap this up here, delete all these faces, and then bridge it across. It's not the same amount of edges. What? Do I have a face here? Yeah, I do. That's why. I'm trying to bridge these guys all across. Bridge. Of course, it's doing the twisty one. We'll bridge this like so. And then bridge everything. And then, so we have this in the middle now. And this is good, one, because we're going to be baking it down this way, so we already have our low poly taken care of. And two, it's going to give these guys better transitions between shapes. So let's grab this guy. Let's get him ready for ZBrush by checking these hard edges. And they are essentially everywhere they're supposed to be, minus here. These should definitely be soft. These should be soft. And these should be soft. So now we can select those faces, break them by the hard edges, and ship it off to ZBrush. ZBrush is starting to take its time loading things. We got this shape now that we can import this onto. And let's zoom in. Let's get a good look at this guy. Can auto groups with UVs, geometry. We're going to crank up the Dynamesh on this guy and then divide it. Going to be polishing by features to smooth it out. We're getting some wonkiness here. It's because the edges are so thin. This is why I don't like thin edges on this stuff. The reason I'm going to go forward with it is because I think a polish will fix it. I guess not. I'm going to go back to when it's less geo and run a polish by features to smooth it all out. Now if we polish it, yeah, it'll soften it out. I kind of want this to stay a hard edge though, so I'm going to mask out this area, but polish the rest. And then give it a little polish, like a polish of 1. Okay, so that's that guy there. I like having these smooth transitions in and out because now it's sort of welcoming this pattern here. So if I grab this pattern, and yes, it is capped off, but when we bake it down, it won't really matter. We're not going to be seeing any of that information. It's all going to be hidden away. But this guy, I'm just going to shoot right over to ZBrush. Subtool, bring him in. With this guy, I'm just going to straight up divide him a bunch, and I'm going to turn smooth off, because if we divide with smooth, it's going to soften everything out. We just want this to have a bunch more geo. so that when we zoom in, there's a lot going on here, and we can polish it very subtly. And I'll soften it out a little tiny bit. So it's like a real piece of metal where it's soft, but it's these little sharp, grippy pieces. I also want to scale this in a little bit. Let's go to our scale tool. Zoom out. If we hit this, it's going to go to unmasked center of mesh, so it's going to center on that. That's something I actually just picked up today, so that's really useful. So our gizmo is going to be in the middle, and we can just shrink it down a little bit so we don't have those grippy bits sort of sticking into the geo. I like it like this a bit more because it looks more intentional. So we got that guy in there. Go and hit edit twice again, so we're back into our normal mode. What's next? We're almost at the end of this part. Once we get this guy done, I suppose we could include this. We'll see. I'm not gonna literally lose sleep over it. I need to do some more stuff before bed, and it's getting late. It's freaking daylight savings time today. I lost an hour. So yeah, anyways, a little rant out of the way. Let's grab this guy. This is literally just a cylinder. It's about as simple as it gets. So the hard edges should already be set up, which they are. Send this over. This one should be a no-brainer. Subtool. Okay, we got that guy in. Auto groups with UV, geometry, Dynamesh. And a little subtle polish to get the edges softer. I don't know if you'll ever see those edges. Also, that hole's a lot bigger. We'll see if that's going to be an issue with everything else. It honestly might be. So we'll have to see about that. This is a bearing that we put together. I'm just starting to think about that now. I'm thinking that might be a bit of an issue, but we'll see. Let's just get this bearing in there first. Break up those UV shells. Send it off. So we should be able to tell if it's a problem right here. OBJ in. I mean, you really just cannot tell at all. Let's auto group with UVs and give this guy the polish treatment. Start by Dynameshing. Dynamesh is not doing wonders for this one. We'll crank out Dynamesh to max. Polish by features, and then a standard polish. Something like that. It's looking pretty good. And this is poking through, but that's totally fine. I am going to take this, go to the scale tool, center it, and honestly, we can't really tell what's going on too much, so I'm just going to straight up just scale it up like so, and pull it forward. So that should do that. You can't really tell what's going on in here anyway, so it doesn't matter if it's poking through too much. Go back to edit, and I want to do something similar with this bolt. Let's get the move tool on there, and we can just sort of push him in there a little bit more, scale him up. Maybe scaling up isn't the right answer. His rotation seems to be a little funky. That seems to do the trick. So we got that all in there. Okay, these are all separate parts if I remember correctly, which is good. These guys, so this is actually a really good example of something. As you can see, these are incredibly small shapes, and they're all touching each other, or very close to touching each other. If we were to bring this directly into ZBrush and we were to Dynamesh it, what would happen exactly is it would just say, oh, these are close, they're similar in shape. It would morph them all together. We obviously don't want that, so what I'm going to be doing is essentially separating every other one and bringing them in two batches and then combining them inside of ZBrush after they've been smoothed out. So shift right click, extract faces, and then we can just sort of do a combine on these guys. We have two different groups. Let's export this first group. This is such a tiny detail. It is a little bit silly to even be going this far into detail, but that's the whole point of the tutorial, I suppose. If anyone notices this detail, I'd be surprised. But it makes things a little bit more realistic and fun. So we'll auto group Dynamesh at max on these guys because they're so small. I might even divide them and smooth them just to get them to be soft. That's pretty much it, and just delete the lower. We don't really have to do any polishing. That's kind of it on these guys. I don't remember which group we brought in. We brought in the one where there's none in the middle. Okay. So now we will hide these ones and we'll bring in these guys. Exact same scenario where we duplicate, obj in, and now there's no risk of them sort of melting together. Divide, delete lower. Right, and that's that. Got those little bearings in there. Then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more pieces, and then we'll probably call it a part. And that's also a very natural place to end because minus this guy, it's the whole chunk. We can do that one in the next one. It'll be quick. But we're essentially blazing through this stuff. We're going to have to do a little bit more work on some of these areas at the very start where we didn't set them up completely properly. And some areas like the ruler might need a little bit more love. I'm not sure if I'm going to be sculpting in the ruler details in ZBrush or if I'll be doing them in Painter. Painter's sounding a bit more appealing right now. But we'll see. Anyways, let's just get this part done. Okay. Hard edges are pretty much all where they should be. Mine is here. And here. So just softening those out. You can go ahead and split those up in our UV shells. Send this boy off to be with his brethrens in ZBrush. OBJ in, get this guy in here. Auto groups. Geometry, we are not going to dynamesh this guy at max. Let's try something like 800 first, which is obviously too low. We can do like a little bit higher. 1700 maybe could be a good one. If we try to polish by features, oh, gotta turn it on to the right setting. Yeah, that's looking about right. And then we can mask by features groups. Grow the mask to be a bit more bold and wider. Polish these areas that we targeted pretty aggressively. And this is sticking through. I honestly don't think that's an issue because we're going to not be able to see the back of it. What I am a little bit concerned with is this is looking a little bit janky, so I'm going to be undoing all this. And I do want to polish by features a few more times just to soften everything out. Now we can do our mask. Invert it. And polish this guy up. Yeah, that's looking nice and soft. Maybe too soft. These bearings look like they're drowning in there. But at the same time, no, that's not right. There, I'm going to stop the polish by features here, where these guys are still properly, exposed. Then do our polish pass. Maybe polish without a mask on. And there we go. They're still positioned correctly. The shape is nice and round. And we can send it to the ZBrush stack, where we'll return to it eventually. Let's grab this ring. Is this just a ring on its own? I guess I set it up that way. I can see why, just for separation reasons, which is kind of interesting. In hindsight, I probably should have just made it all the same. Let's auto smooth this and see these hard edges. Okay, have the UV shell split up along the hard edges. Send this off. Go into ZBrush. Subtool. Duplicate. OBJ in. Shift F. Auto groups. Geometry. Dynamesh it. This should be fine because it's a pretty simple one. We're just going to polish by features a bunch of times, get it really nice and round, and then just a standard polish on the edge. Very subtle, but nice, and we get a cool panel line in there. There's a little bit of a gap now though, so I'm going to have to move this in a little bit. So I'm going to go to the move option, alt click it there, just center it. reset mesh orientation, mesh to axis. I wonder if there's a way to get the orientation of this guy back to normal. Mesh to axis. Nope. Reset mesh to orientation. Nope. I guess if I just alt click on it, I shift moved my camera so I snapped onto it perfectly, and then alt clicked where I wanted it to go, and that sends this to be, or it forces this to be very straight. So I can just sort of push this in a little bit. So that's that. Send this guy off to the shadow realm. Okay, 3 pieces to go. This one we sort of had as like a bunch of little like bands. This might be a weird one to do, honestly. I'm tempted to grab all these edges and just straight up bevel them, because I feel like it'll be easier to go about things that way. I feel like if I try and rely on a polish to soften this out, we're going to lose these sort of strips here in between everything. So I'm just going to straight up, yeah, bevel everything out. So in order to do so, I obviously have to select every edge, or edge loop here rather. Just hit Control B, softens everything out. I'm not going to worry about the hard edges on this. I'm just going to be sending this guy out. Subtool. We can append a random shape. One of the things I should really do is actually get the new version of ZBrush, because it comes with groups, and that sounds like a blessing right about now. OBJ in, to sort of be able to organize everything into little groups here with folders. But anyways, we have this in. Shift F to auto group. We don't really need to do that actually. Dynamesh, let's crank this pretty high. I might even max this or get it in the 3000s just to retain its shape. Because I feel like when we polish by features, it might... that's not horrible. It's actually kind of what we're going for. If I do little bursts of it though, it's a little bit more like the shape I'm wanting. Something like this, and then a standard polish to balance it all out. Or is it polished crisp edges that I'm going for? This is like rope in the reference images, and I sort of interpreted it as like metallic twine. So it's not like in polish by features. If I divide and smooth and then polish by features, maybe to like it more. Yeah, it seems to. Excuse me. I think that's fine, honestly. Then I polish the whole thing. Yeah, I just wanted that kind of banding look more than anything. Can send that to ZBrush. Just these two guys left. Hard edges on this one should be pretty much exactly what you'd expect. So let's get those UV shells in order. Send it off. And bring that in. Actually, I feel like I should save. I'm gonna go to File, Save As, and just save over this. It's been a while, and I would really hate for everything to crash right now. But yeah, we can auto groups, geometry, Dynamesh, I like 1600. Maybe more, because most of the geometry is just this big open face. Maybe closer to 2000. To our polished by features. It's completely destroying the front, but that's not the most horrible thing, because it's really easy to mask this area out. Just make my brush bigger. And it's just flat, so it really doesn't matter if we're masking it out. But we can just type in 100 a couple of times, make sure we're not making a gap or anything like that. Invert our mask, and then maybe experiment with doing a couple in there, polish it out. That's pretty much just the shape I'm going for. And then we can polish the outside very subtly. I'm just going to mask by features, grow mask, sharpen, invert it, and then color this in again. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to polish this, but I want it to be very small, and I can just keep it within this mask. Kind of like that. I like that. Okay. We just got to add the screws, and that'll do it for this part. Once again, they're all one part, really easy to work with. Just sort of duplicate OBJ in. And this is just pretty much going to be us. We're not even dynameshing, we're just dividing a couple of times, deleting the lower layers, and polishing, softening those guys out. Yeah, and that'll do it. That'll probably do it for this part. This is pretty much like the main frame and everything that's attached to it. There is that one little thing on the front, and I might want to get this bar that's sticking through here, but we can do that at the very start of the next part. We got quite a bit done here. Moving forward, until we get everything inside of ZBrush and everything sort of polished up and ready to add damage to, I think each part is probably going to be a little bit longer. If I were to wager, yeah, well, I guess this isn't that much longer than a standard part, but I recently uploaded a bunch of these to my Dropbox to sort of get the files ready for everyone to sort of get them and check them out. And I noticed that the file sizes were way too big, so I had to start compressing things. And for a video like this, let's say it's an hour, to render them and compress them and upload them takes probably over 3 hours. And if I'm going to be spending that much of a chunk of time, I might as well have the video itself be longer and I get more done, because the difference between 3 hours to upload and 3.5 hours to upload isn't that different, but I can get so much more content done that way. So I want to wrap this up now just because it's getting late. Let's go ahead and save this. It's going to not want me to close it, but I'm going to hit no anyways because it's asking me to save something different. But yeah, moving forward, these will probably be a little bit longer. Let's get these two guys into our ZBrush file. All we have to do is do a polish pass on these guys, add some damage, which is always super, super fun. And that is the Highpoly done. Like I said, way faster now that we got the whole blockout done. That's why I sort of like this workflow. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. And yeah, I will catch you in the next part where we probably tackle the top area or the keyboard. I'll figure it out later. All right, see you guys.